Hello, this is Janet from janetsandberg.com, and you're listening to the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast, the weekly show that talks to peers and professionals who open up about their darkest moments when they felt like ending it all, why they didn't, and how they transformed their lives in order to triumph over the darkness and despair. Please remember to subscribe if you'd like to hear more inspiring stories. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Janet Sandberg, and today we are joined by the lovely Tammy Vincent. So, Tammy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Janet, first of all. Well, I live in Florida and I am right now a writer, a speaker, a coach, and my niche is very specific. My niche is adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. So when you sum up my life, it was a life of dysfunction. So, but after a 30-year healing journey, I realized that it doesn't have to take 30 years. There's a lot of shortcuts that you can help people get to places of empowerment and just a happier place in so few steps, I guess you could say. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you for doing that work. It is so needed. And I think a lot of us that are coaches, because I'm a coach and a healer as well. And it's because, we go through these healing journeys and we're like, why did that take so long? Like now that we know we can help other people. And I think, you said you started, 30 years ago
Mm-hmm.
and, mine started a long time ago as well. And there just there weren't coaches back then, for one thing. There weren't healers. Like it was all just new and budding. We didn't have the internet to help us find resources, and there weren't podcasts, and we were fighting this fight very much alone. And so I think that's why a lot of us get into helping others, because we want it to be easier for other
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm just a toolbox. I'm a toolbox, and you come to me and you say, okay, this is what's happening, and I can pull tools out or give resources or just
Exactly.
be that guiding person, that mentor. But like you said, we did not have that. I can remember sitting on the floor of the library, flipping through psychology books, which is now your self-help or personal development section. They didn't even have those sections back then. And just sitting on the floor crying, going, I gotta figure something
Oh, yes, I remember those days. Yeah, and you just couldn't find what you were looking for. And
No,
people weren't writing and also there was no self-publishing. So you couldn't just write your own story and put it out there in the world to help people. Like, you had to have an agent and a publishing contract, and they just weren't selling those types of books. It was all very heady, intellectual, you're reading case studies and
exactly.
stuff like that. It was not easy or super helpful. So, and again, that's also why I started my podcast, why you started your podcast, is so that we can reach more people, let them know that they don't have to go through this alone, and they don't have to suffer for as long. There is hope. We can get through it. And we're here sharing our stories to let you know that it's true. We're not just, a bunch of hot air saying, oh, it'll get
Absolutely.
better. Like a lot of people placate people who are struggling. It'll get better. You'll be fine. Just wait. But having these personal experiences really shows that so many of us struggle. So many of us go through these dark times, and
Absolutely.
come out the other side.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's get into your story. Tammy, tell us what was going on in your life. We have a little bit of an idea, I'm guessing, that had something to do with being a child of dysfunction that led you to not wanting to be here on this side of the earth anymore. Um,
Well,
but but tell us.
yeah. So it did start very, very young. And it was just years and years and years of just horrific stuff. And I remember it was actually, I was 16. I was at my mother's house. I had lived with my parents all my life, but they had in second grade told me they were divorcing and then didn't even separate until ninth grade.
Oh
So
my
7 years of like physical fights, mental,
gosh.
emotional abuse, burning cigarettes, all of that stuff. So my dad got remarried for whatever reason. He thought it was a good idea for me to go live with my mother. I was not being the perfect child at the time. I will be honest. I was very rebellious and getting attention in any way, shape, or form. So he made me told me to go live with my mother. Well, she was in Massachusetts. I had moved from New Jersey to Massachusetts, and it was bad. She was very deep into the drugs at the time. And I was, my lunch hours were spent running to the grocery store and stealing whatever food I could get my hands on and then running back because I didn't have any money. I didn't have any food. If there was orange juice in the house, it had vodka in it.
Oh,
It was rough. And
yeah.
I remember my friends, I didn't have many friends because I was only there for a few months, but I had two friends and they were out on a Friday night. And I was like, no, I can't. My mom will not let me. I can't get a ride. We lived out in Massachusetts in the woods. And I remember standing there and I actually had her jug of orange juice and a box of rat poison. And I was literally getting ready to mix them, for me, but for my
Oh,
mother.
oh, wow.
It was for my mother. And it hit me so hard, like, because at that point, that's when you feel worthless and you've been told your whole life you're good for nothing. My dad had kicked me out. I mean, everything was bad. And I remember just saying, what the heck kind of person am I that I could take a human life when hers, no matter how bad things are, hers is clearly more valuable than mine. And so I turned it on myself.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't do the rat poison thing because I was like, oh, that's going to hurt. Like
Yeah.
it was really kind of funny because I'm thinking, oh, it was okay to do it to her. But, I'm like, yeah, no. But I did find a lot of her pills and I ate a lot of them. And I just remember going, okay, I can't be here. I'm a horrible person that I would even consider taking someone's life.
Hmm.
And even though it's my mom specifically, the person that was supposed to love and care for me. And so I did. I took handfuls of pills. And first I called the suicide hotline. Um, just kind of like, help me. I don't know what to do. I'm shaking. I really want to end my life. And they started talking about my parents. Well, my parents were the reason I was in this
Oh my
situation.
gosh.
Like what would
Oh,
it do to your parents? I'm like, my mom would love it. My dad would probably love it. He just kicked me out of the house. It would be like burdens gone. So
oh,
probably not the best answer for me at the time.
no, no.
And so I was just like, well, that was not what I needed. So, yes, so I did. And I guess I'm very resilient and can handle a lot of medicine because I threw up for 4 days.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I woke up, I never went to the hospital, but I did, I woke up and I was like, what am I still doing here? I'm like, okay, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a plan, something like I can. But, it's funny because my initial reaction was, God, I even suck at that. I can't even do that right. Which I think back about it now and I'm like, that wasn't really a funny, I mean, it was kind of a funny reaction because I was like, wow, I can't even get that one right. But yeah, that was rough. It was a rough time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you were how old? 16?
16.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, 16 is a rough time anyways, but with all of that going on and yeah, you're so desperate and yeah, I can just see all the factors at play there and
My mother was very into drugs at the time and was not paying her drug dealers and thought it was okay for me to pay her debts. So
oh,
that was my breaking point, I think. That
yeah.
was like, no, I'm not going to be pimped out to your drug dealers. Not going to
No.
happen. And
No.
that's when, that happened for a little bit. And then I was like, no, 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 this is not right. And at that point, it was her fault to me in my mind. And
Oh,
that's why it
absolutely.
started with, let me get rid of her.
Sure.
But that's not how it happened.
No. So what happened after that? So you woke up and and we're oh, I can't even imagine just being sick and detoxing basically
Yeah,
for
I was, yeah,
for
very sick.
a week.
Yeah, I threw up for
Um,
about 4 days and didn't going to go to the hospital. My mom actually asked me what was wrong, and I told her that I drank her alcohol because I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And what else could I do? So I was just going to sit here and see what it felt like to be drunk all the time. And that's what I told her that was wrong. So she never thought anything of it. Um, and then I packed my bags. I called my dad and I said, Dad, I have to come home for the weekend. And this was about, it was, I think, the day, like 2 days before Easter. And I packed my bags. And when I got off the airplane, I said, you can kick me out. You can do whatever you want, but I cannot go back. Cannot. And never told him, never really told anybody actually until I went into therapy, like literally 10 years later.
mhm.
Um, but just kind of was like, okay, I'm at least safe now. So I moved back home. My dad let me stay for a couple months and then it just wasn't working. So I rented. I was actually at that point I guess I stayed home for like 6 or 7 months because then I was a senior in high school. I rented a room from a friend of mine. His father had an extra room. So I worked like 2 jobs all through high school just to get through to be able to do sports, still got my straight A's, still did what I was supposed to
Wow.
do as the perfect child, and but didn't live at home. So in that time, I remember I kept praying, like, who is going to help me? And I
Yeah.
can again, I always kind of brought humor into it. They have the different family roles. I was always the funny one, the mascot, the joking one. And I can remember praying and saying, who is going to help me? And all I could hear was this voice, and I'm assuming it was God saying, Tammy, Tammy, Tammy. And it didn't dawn on me. Like I was like, wait, are you mocking me? Are you not even giving me an answer? And it didn't dawn on me until about 2 years later. He was basically saying, help yourself. No one's coming for you. No one's coming to save you. You got to
Right.
help yourself. So I went to college. I moved out as soon as I could. I unfortunately was still partying and making bad choices and everything else. But I was at least aware of the fact that nobody was coming to help me and I was going to have to do it on my own.
Right. Yeah, which
So,
is excuse me, the first big realization and decision that needs to be made,
yep.
that
And
we can't wait to be rescued.
yes, and I was not going to wait anymore. So I did, I went, like I said, I would sit on the floor of the library and read books on suicide and all of, self-help books or whatever they had it there at that time. And just my mom was actually ironically a child psychiatrist.
Oh my goodness.
So I had read so many of her psychology books. I think it was like I had all this stuff in the back of my head that I was like, wow, there's tools. There's things. There's things I can do. Like there's stories. I mean, I had met people through her work with multiple personality disorders and I had met different versions. And so I went through a lot of that, like, okay, let me try this. And from a young age, even, I was a very big dissociator. So
Hmm.
I would kind of step outside, watch my body and solve her problems, not mine. I still feel like I tend, that is my, I don't want to, that is my coping strategy. And it has been, I think, my whole life where I kind of have this outside view. Well, then once I started getting better, it was a healthy way to do it. It was literally, now that I look at it, it was being in that self-hypnotic, semi-hypnotic state where I was solving my problems through visualization, through,
Right.
mindfulness, through all of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And then I hit another wall, like when I was 26 and getting ready to have my first child, because that's when my world came crashing down as far as how bad the effects of living with alcoholic parents actually were.
Hmm.
Like the fact that I was 26 getting ready to have a baby and had never in my life felt unconditional love.
Right.
So I was
And then,
panicked. I
yeah.
Yeah. And
And
it's
all the
like
doubts,
yes,
can I be a parent? I wasn't parented myself,
exactly.
all
Like
of those
what could I
things.
possibly do? Like I don't even have a memory of hugging my mother. I don't have one memory. So I'm like, just the fact of like, oh my gosh, I'm 100% responsible for this child, and I don't even know if I can help myself. But that is where the real healing began,
Right.
because that is when, I mean, I would spend hours, 6 to 8 hours a day sometimes, sitting on the floor of the library, just bawling like a baby, reading parenting books and books about suicide and books about drug use and alcoholism and all of this. And praying, and it kept coming back to me, help yourself. You've got to help yourself. And that's when I went into therapy and did, over the next, 20 years, did so many different modalities. I got certified in pretty much all of them except for being an actual psychiatrist or a counselor, because again, I was like, I need to know what you're doing before you try it on me. So,
Right.
so before I would let someone hypnotize me, I would get certified in hypnotherapy. So, because I was like, well, let me make sure they're not messing with me. Because I didn't trust anybody.
Wow.
So I end up with all of these certifications. I had a coaching certification like 20 years ago before it was even a thing.
Hmm.
But I was like, wow, these people like really help people. I could help people. And so that's kind of my journey. And it was really when I got into the different modalities of like EFT tapping. Like I still use it to this day, and I use it with all of my clients.
Tapping is amazing.
It
Yes.
really is. And people say, oh, it's just for if you're afraid to fly. I'm like, no, it's for everything. It's for a pain in your neck. It's for literally everything that you need it for. You can use it. Still use a lot of meditation and a lot of visualization and a lot of reframing things and rewriting my past to give it a better story. Because as you know, when you're in that hyped up, suicidal ideology, and you're you're not thinking from your normal straight, your thoughts are coming from everywhere, and you're filling in all of the gaps of what you don't know.
Hmm.
So it
Interesting.
took, yes, so it took years for me to rewrite. I still rewrite stories. If I think about something, I'm like, well, I don't really know. Like, did that really happen? And I'm like, well, if it's bothering me, let me go back and picture it a different way. If I don't really know what happened anyway, and it's just ideas in my mind, that they might as well be good ones.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've never heard of that or contemplated it before.
So I'll give you an example.
Yes,
A
please.
real life example. So if you're thinking, perfect example is you walk into work and you've got a low self-esteem. So you see somebody raise their eyebrow at you, and you automatically, your subconscious mind goes, "Ooh, I did something wrong. I must not be good at my job. I mean, they're looking at me. People are talking about me." When you have low self-esteem, that's what happens.
Okay.
But nobody ever said, you don't have you're not good at your job. You aren't worthy. You did that wrong. Nobody ever said it. So if you can't put something tangible to it, then it was just made up in your mind.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
will close my eyes, and this is, I mean, years ago that I started doing this, but I will literally close my mind and be like, okay, she raised her eyebrow because she has an itch on her nose. And then the whole meaning behind it. So then the next time someone raises an eyebrow, I'm like, oh, they must have an itchy nose. It's so simple how you can trick your mind
Yes.
and give things different meanings. And really, when you're that in that deep of a desperate, dark place, just not thinking about bad things is not enough. You have to replace every bad thought with a positive thought.
Yes. Yes.
A
Yeah.
100%.
It reminds me a little bit of Byron Katie's The Work. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, where she has a, for the listeners who don't know, she has a worksheet where it's basically there's a situation that bothers you and you just ask yourself, is it true? How do I know it's true?
Right.
And you go through, and most of the time, you figure out it's not true at all. You're just making up stories in your head.
Right. Which is exactly what we're
So,
talking about. And
yeah,
it's perfect. And so again, if you've made up the story in your head, then you might as well give it different meaning. I mean, if
yeah,
you're going to make something up anyway, make something up positive.
right. Yes, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna give that a go next time I I start thinking negatively about past situations and be like, well, maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe that was just how I perceived it in the moment, but maybe it could have really been this way.
Exactly. And I do that, that work is a lot of reframing, just really reframing things. And that it helps for a lot of different situations, a lot of different negative mindset, because nobody gets to the point of wanting to end their life that does not have a very negative mindset. It just doesn't, it's physically impossible.
Yeah.
So, and most of those negative mindsets are so deeply ingrained, they have to be reprogrammed.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What are some of your favorite modalities that you've learned?
As I mentioned, the tapping.
Mm-hmm.
I also love journaling, and mostly in journaling, writing letters to myself, and then
Mm.
writing letters to the problem and writing letters back to myself.
Oh, interesting.
And I did that. I started that when I did a lot of inner child work, where you would write a letter to your younger self. And then that was great. You got all this off your chest and you were like, I'm here for you and I love you. And, you were worthy and you are valued and you are heard. But then to write it back from that younger child, wow, the floodgates just open.
Mm.
So I always do two parts where I'm writing. So let's say I feel like journaling about, a negative thought that came to my mind, that the mean me, the inner critic, basically, you could say.
Yes.
I will write a letter to that inner critic and be like, well, tell me why I did this, or tell me why you think I'm lazy, or whatever it is that my inner critic is telling me. And then let it write you a letter back. Because that, again, that's like a different side of
Mm.
your mind. You can use even your opposite hand sometimes. When you do
Yeah.
inner child work, you can write with the opposite hand. But that's one of my favorites. I get a lot of things answered, and I always do it before I go to bed when I'm kind of tired, so that it's right before I fall asleep. So it's what I'm thinking about when I go to sleep.
Mm.
So that the tapping is very, very helpful. A lot of just mindfulness, just quiet and thinking and just silence. And even though you can't silence, it's just being curious,
Mm-hmm.
spending a lot of time being curious
Yeah.
and just questioning, and and just always having that positive, don't beat yourself up about it, just be curious about it.
Right. I love that. Yeah. And even when those negative thoughts start spiraling and cycling and getting recycled in your head, why? Why am I thinking this? Just being open to it rather than just accepting it as a given, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Because
What?
when you look at it with curiosity instead of judgment, it's a lot easier to get rid of it.
Yes.
It
Yes.
doesn't get you into that spiral of negative.
Right. So what is one piece of advice you could give to somebody who's struggling right now?
That you are 100% worth it. That no matter what you've been through or what you go through, like you said, it's one moment in time and it will pass. So you just have to get through to the next day or the next moment, the next second sometimes, and know that you are 100% worth it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
being here today, Tammy. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom and everything you have learned on your journey. And I look forward to reconnecting with you sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.